The Vatican preparations move forward for the canonization of first Venezuelan saints, Jose Gregorio Hernandez and Carmen Rendiles, on October 19th. In the United States, thousands take to the streets to protest against Donald Trump's policies at No Kings events across all 50 states of the country. And in Palestine, thousands of Muslim worshippers attended prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque despite restrictions imposed by Israeli occupation forces. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We'll begin with the news. In Vatican City, St. Peter's Basilica is ready for the canonization ceremony of the first Venezuelan saints, Jose Gregorio Hernandez and Mother Carmen Rendiles, this Sunday, October 19th. On the eve of this event, portraits of the saints were displayed on the facade of St. Peter's Basilica. They will remain there for the faithful to see during the solemn Mass to be presided over by Pope Leo XIV. The ceremony will be a historic milestone. Jose Gregorio Hernandez, the Doctor of the Poor, and Mother Carmen Rendiles, founder of the Congregation of the Servants of Jesus, will become the first Venezuelan saints. Regarding Dr. Hernandez, Pope Leo XIV highlighted his life, emphasizing how he combined his high medical competence with a deep dedication to the most vulnerable. And in Cuba, the Grandma Rebelde International Festival continues on its second day. Let's go live with our correspondent Belén de los Santos for all the details.
Hello, Luis. Exactly as you were saying, we're here live from Havana, Cuba, in this festival that is really about journalism and revolutionary journalism. This is the Grandma Rebelde Festival, the festival that is honoring the 60 years of these two media outlets, Granma and Juventud Rebelde, the two revolutionary media outlets here in Cuba after the great victory of 1959. And we're here, we continue to share experiences and visit different stands as well. We have participants from over 30 countries, and at this moment we have the pleasure of being joined by Tim Boyd. He's from Belgium, from the organization Medic for the People. Thank you and welcome, Tim, for joining us here in teleSUR English.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here today, and I must say when I entered this morning I was immediately impressed. It's really a fantastic festival.
It is a fantastic festival. It's full of debates, but also so much culture. We can tell the viewers as well that there are actually cultural activities happening at this moment. We have panels debating some key issues, like, for example, the key role of Fidel in journalism, but also great cultural activities, La Colmenita, Cuban classic theater, a young company, theater company that is a classic here in Cuba, is actually performing right now. You'll probably in a few minutes afterwards see some images, and we continue to debate about journalism today. So Tim, please tell us, what is your first insights being here at the festival? What was your first impression?
Well, I was mostly impressed to see how much new initiatives are also here present today. I see a lot of young people, new media initiatives, people who are trying to take a progressive message to the world by all kinds of new media, and that's something interesting to bring all these people together and to exchange ideas, because the world is changing very rapidly, and we as progressive people need to bring analysis and a message of hope to people, and we need to find new ways to interact with all those people, and it's fun to have this exchange today with all these young people trying to do the same.
And it calls my attention, the idea that the hegemonic narrative usually sets the global south as a place where people are looking towards the north for like a prospect of development, and you are talking about coming to the global south for ideas of hope, for ideas of moving forward with the working class agenda. So I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, you come from a European country, why is it important to be in contact with the global south in order to foster those perspectives?
Well, I must say I'm from Belgium, and we have an organization of health centers in our country, and I must say in 1 year time a lot has changed, because there is really a fastly growing idea of more militarization. Our government decided to expand the budget for military expenses from 1.5% to 3.5%. So this is about 20 billion euros for our country, and the government is going to take that budget from social security. So our healthcare is really degrading very rapidly. And yeah, we try to create more resistance against the story of militarization, nationalism, us against the rest of the world. And yeah, what I witnessed in the few days I've been to Cuba this week is the opposite. Is an idea of collaboration, an idea of peace, an idea of prosperity, and an idea of defending our social rights instead of diminishing them. Yeah.
Definitely one of the key aspects to keep in mind is the possibility of thinking of another way of structuring those priorities when in the north, because you were talking about cuts to healthcare, and of course that's a reality in Belgium, but that has been and continues to be a reality in many countries in the north and many liberal countries in the south as well. And just coming together to share those perspectives just gives us a little bit of a broader margin to understand that it's really all about global economics, not just what happens in one territory. So finally, you're going back home. What would you take back in order to really continue fostering these narratives and the possibility of just spreading in the world the idea that there are other alternatives, or at least there are people in search of new alternatives every day?
Well, I think the most important thing to learn is that we don't have to be afraid. So a lot of people in Europe are afraid of the future. They do not want war. They do not want cuts and austerity and healthcare. They want to keep their social rights, but they are afraid. And I think there's also fear in Latin America, fear of what is Donald Trump going to do, what is the US going to do, what will be our future. But there is resistance, and there is hope, and there is a willingness to win. And I think this is something we also need to take back to Europe, where there is also resistance, but we have to foster the message of hope. If we are afraid and if we let us guide by fear, then we will not win.
We need to spread that message of hope. I love those words. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us. So just a little bit of what is happening here in Havana. Of course, Luis, we will continue to bring you all the updates. We have more panels, more guests, and more cultural events here in the Granma Rebelde Festival. For now, Luis, I go back to you.
For the latest information and for your guests as well, for their inputs here from the South. Of course, we want to stay tuned for everything that is happening in this international festival, in this first edition of the Granma Rebelde International Festival. For now, let's take a first break. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the United States, thousands rally in several cities across the country to protest against President Donald Trump's policies. These are the unions and social movements mobilized to pressure the government over the authoritarian actions of the Republican president. Amidst anti-immigrant raids in the cities of Chicago, New York, Texas, and California, at least 5 million people are expected to take to the streets. In response to the outflow of protests, the U.S. government ordered the deployment of the National Guard to control the mobilizations. Meanwhile, hundreds of U.S. citizens gathered in Spain's capital city to condemn President Donald Trump's actions. The day was marked by slogans and posters rejecting the closure of public programs and federal services imposed by Donald Trump. Protesters asserted that the U.S. government is taking authoritarian measures before the National Congress. At the same time, other European cities are also mobilizing against the Trump administration as part of the No Kings protests. On the other hand, thousands of UK citizens gathered at the US Embassy in London to express their rejection of the policy promoted by US President Donald Trump. With flags and slogans, protesters condemned budget cuts to public services and in turn condemned anti-immigration policies in the United States. The United Nations Security Council decided to extend for another year the regime of sanctions imposed against Haiti. The sanctions package was passed unanimously and includes asset freezing, travel ban, and an arms embargo targeted at specific individuals. According to the agency, the measure seeks to halt the illicit flow of weapons to armed criminal groups responsible for serious acts of violence in the Caribbean country. The vote takes place shortly after the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on the former head of presidential security, Dimitri Gerard, for his involvement in the assassination of the former president, Jovenel Moïse, in 2021. And the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights on Friday called on Ecuador to investigate the death of 2 indigenous people during protests against the government of President Daniel Noboa. Since September 22nd, indigenous peoples have been blocking roads to protest against the elimination of the diesel subsidy, which raises the cost of living in rural areas, where 41% of people live in poverty. To repress the protests, Noboa deployed the armed forces to the most conflictive areas. Local human rights organizations condemned the excessive use of force against protesters and journalists. The commission condemned the death of Rosa Elena Paqui in Loja and Jose Alberto Guaman in Imbabura this week and of Efraín Fuentes in September. And in Brazil, the investigation into former President Jair Bolsonaro reopened, seeking to determine if he promoted interference in the police during his administration. The reopening of the judicial investigation was ordered by Judge Alexandre de Moraes, one of the members of the Brazilian Supreme Court, following a request made on Wednesday by the Attorney General Paulo Gonet. Jair Bolsonaro, currently under house arrest, was sentenced in September to 27 years and 3 months in prison for leading a plot to stage a coup after losing the 2022 elections to President Lula da Silva. The far-right politician is also under investigation for allegedly stealing $1.2 million worth of jewelry received during official trips to Saudi Arabia. And this Saturday marks 6 years since the social unrest in Chile. Protests were sparked by deep social uprising and were suppressed by security forces. In October 2019, the metro fare increase triggered the largest protest since the end of the dictatorship. They reflected discontent with inequality and neoliberalism. 6 years after the popular uprisings, the prosecutor's office acknowledged in a report that there were 30 deaths and 464 victims of eye injuries, mostly caused by projectiles fired by security forces. The report also states that between October 18, 2019 and March 31, 2020, there were 35,146 crimes committed in the country, 34.1% of which were committed by state agents. And as part of the preparations for the COP30 climate summit to be held in Brazil, several countries are documenting their progress in the plastic recycling process. In a context of growing global plastic pollution, various regions are intensifying their recycling efforts, although often in a sporadic manner. Countries such as China, Germany, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Brazil detail the processing of this waste, the sorting and an innovative conversion of bottles into yarn and fibers for the textile industry, among other products. However, experts agree that addressing the challenge of plastic waste requires strong international cooperation and sustainable initiatives to mitigate its impact on the environment on a global scale. We now have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. The final break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Palestine, thousands of Muslim worshippers attended prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque despite restrictions imposed by Israeli occupation forces. Amid escalating tensions, at least 50,000 worshippers gathered to pray in memory of the martyrs of the genocide in the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank. In response, the Israeli army strengthened restrictions on access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, using iron barriers to block streets in the vicinity of the old city. Witnesses reported serious incidents at the Al-Asbat Gate, where occupation soldiers attacked worshippers. And the Palestinian government media office issued a statement denouncing that the destruction in the Gaza Strip has reached an unprecedented level. The enclave is buried under a mass of between 65 and 70 million tons of rubble and debris. The media office emphasized that hundreds of thousands of structures, including homes, hospitals, and shelters, have been deliberately destroyed or damaged by the Israeli army, transforming the Strip into an environmental and structural disaster zone. It also warned that the work of removing the rubble will face serious obstacles due to the lack of heavy machinery, which is prohibited from entering the territory by the Israeli authorities. The United Nations urged the Israeli government to immediately reactivate all border crossings in Gaza. The agency insists that the border crossings north of the Gaza Strip be open as famine continues to threaten the survival of local residents, despite the fact that since October 17th, some 560 tons of food have been transported daily. The figure remains lower in the enclosed areas. In addition, it states that in order to ensure an increase in aid, it is necessary to open more border crossings as the destruction of roads is preventing the delivery of food to northern Gaza. Cambodian authorities announced the deportation of at least 60 South Korean citizens detained on suspicion of belonging to a large-scale cyber fraud network. Cambodian Interior Ministry spokesman Tut Sukak said the measure is the result of good cooperation between the two countries in the fight against fraud following intense negotiations with Seoul. For his part, South Korean National Security Advisor Wai Sung-kyak confirmed that almost all of the deportees are classified as criminal suspects and will be returned to the country in accordance with the relevant legal procedures. This event comes amidst an expansion of the multi-billion-dollar illegal cyber fraud industry in recent years. The 14th China Art Festival opened in Chengdu in the southwestern province of Sichuan, highlighting the Asian country's leading artistic creations. The opening of the event was marked by the work Shudao, which reflects the cultural essence of the Asian public road. The festival, organized by the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, includes more than 100 performing artworks, 174 cultural productions, and nearly 1,000 pieces of calligraphy, photography, and painting. In addition, the event, which will end on November 5th, will award the prestigious National Performing Arts Awards, the Win Yuan Award, and the Shunqing Award. Like this, you have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.